Welcome to the Path of Exile's Currency Farm Spotlight featuring Sanctum, the Trial of the Sekhemas. The Trial of the Sekhemas, which moving forward we will be referring to as Sanctum, is the first of Path of Exile 2's Ascendancy trials. It also happens to be a great way to earn currency. In this guide, we'll be going over the currency farming portion of Sanctum. If you are a beginner wanting to learn the basics of Sanctum, I'll be redirecting you to 10KA's guide. Link is in the description. With that out of the way, let's get started. The first question to ask is, should you farm Sanctum? My answer is yes, but there are a couple things to consider. Is your build fast? There is a lot of ground to traverse in Sanctum, so having a fast build helps significantly. If you are a stat stacking Tempest Flurry build, a Queen of the Forest build, or a Temporalis build, you will have a significantly easier time. You will also have more options for relic setups. You can still run Sanctum without these things. You'll just be locked into a particular strategy. The next thing to consider is if your build is strong. Your build strength is only concerned when fighting Zarok, the final boss of Sanctum. Like my previous point, it's not overly important to be super strong, but it does open up options as far as how you can earn currency. The final thing to consider is whether you can afford the startup cost to start Sanctum. Relic setups are extremely important. They are the factor that determines how profitable your Sanctum runs are. Later on, we'll be going over each of the popular relic setups, but just know that relic setups can cost anywhere from 1, 5, 25, or even more divines. This is all dependent on what you need to run Sanctum comfortably. Now we will go over how we can make currency in Sanctum. There are 3 prominent ways of earning currency in Sanctum, and they are all via loot drops. They are magic relics, unique relics, and jewels. Magic relics are the common relics you'll be finding all throughout Sanctum. They drop from monsters, chests, and you can even buy some at Balbalet's shop. You should always run a level 80 Jinn Barrier, because only then can you get the highest tier affixes on your magic relics. The magic relics you should be looting are seals, urns, tapestries, and amphoras. The modifiers you are looking for when looting seals and urns are increased quantity of relics alongside one of increased maximum life, increased maximum defenses, increased maximum honor, as well as increased movement speed. The real important modifier is quantity of relics. So long as you find just this modifier, if it's at its maximum value, it will sell for a minimum of 1 divine. As for tapestries and amphoras, you are simply going to look for additional merchant choices as well as reduced merchant prices. You will strictly be looking for these 2 modifiers together, because on their own they are worth little to nothing. Since that is the case, if you find a relic that has one of the lines at its maximum value, you may want to consider using an annulment orb and an augmentation orb in pursuit of the other line. Future me is interjecting to say, if you find seals and urns with traps deal reduced damage, as well as plus meters to dodge roll distance or increased quantity of relics, they can sell for quite a lot. If you know of any other relics that are valuable, please let us know in the comments. As you are going through the floors, you will find your inventory filling rather quickly. For this reason, I suggest carrying a stack of Scroll of Wisdoms as well as augmentation orbs. Use these whenever your inventory fills up and throw out any junk relics you may have in your inventory. Unique relics are thankfully much simpler. You are simply going to be looking for the Desperate Alliance Vase relic, as well as the Last Flame Incense relic. Unique relics only drop by defeating Zarok, who is the final boss of Sanctum. Which unique relic you drop is completely random, but the drop rates are listed on the PoE2 wiki. The Desperate Alliance has an estimated drop rate of 15%, and the Last Flame has an estimated drop rate of 0.5%. These drop rates reflect their prices, as the Desperate Alliance goes for around 2.5 divines, and the Last Flame goes for around 330 divines. How many unique relics you get from Zarok is determined by your relic setup. We will go more into detail when we get to that section. There are 4 different types of jewels you can farm in Sanctum. The standard magic and rare jewels, magic and rare time lost jewels, the unique grand spectrum jewels, and the unique against the darkness time lost jewels. Standard magic and rare jewels can be found all throughout Sanctum, such as by killing mobs or opening chests. They can also be found in silver and gold royal caches. Magic and rare time lost jewels can only be found in time lost caches. Likewise, Grand Spectrum jewels can only be found in Spectrum caches. Finally, the Against the Darkness Time Lost jewel is only found by running the Desperate Alliance relic and killing Zarok. You may have noticed that most of these jewels can only be obtained by opening caches. Not only that, but these caches are usually gold. For that reason, collect gold keys whenever possible, and remember to check the caches of each boss floor rather than just the one at the end. Going over every valuable jewel would be impossible, and frankly I wouldn't know what to tell you. What I suggest is augmenting and exalting all your jewels and throwing it into a dump tab. If you are doing this, do not regal your jewels. Magic jewels can be amongst the most expensive jewels in the game. If you are concerned about missing out on value on jewels, hover over them quickly like I do before you put them into the dump tab, and maybe use a regex with valuable affixes to search for valuable jewels. Once again, I am enlisting the help of the comments section because I personally never used regex. Grand Spectrum jewels are quite easy to price. They will always identify the same, meaning their values are somewhat static. Here are the values of each Grand Spectrum jewels uncorrupted. The rubies, as per usual, are quite undesirable. The emeralds are about half a divine, and the sapphires are the most valuable at 9 divines. In my experience, Spectrum caches only appear every 1 in 15 runs, so you better pray that it's a sapphire when you do get one. There are two ways to approach pricing against the darkness jewels: unidentified or identified. Unidentified ATDs sell for around 4 to 5 divines. Identified ATDs, on the other hand, can range anywhere from 90 exalteds to hundreds of divines. Remember that you had to spend 2.5 divines on a Desperate Alliance relic in order to obtain an ATD. So if you wanted to reliably generate currency, you would sell your ATDs unidentified. This would give you a profit of 2 divine per run. Identifying ATDs is profitable but risky. If you have to ask whether you should identify or not, I suggest you don't. Identifying ATDs is gambling, and you should only gamble when you are confident you can take the losses. If you are going to identify your ATDs, here are some of the affixes you're going to look for. Spirit, attributes, gain extra damage, and mana are typically the high value ATDs. You should still price check every ATD though, because you only get one per run. Due to the variability of our currency generation method, Sanctum does not have a consistent divine per hour I could quote you. For example, if you drop a last flame within the first few runs, your currency generation will be hundreds of divines an hour. The only guaranteed profits are by running the Desperate Alliance relic and selling your unidentified ATD. Even then, your luck with your loot determines how much you profit from Sanctum. Otherwise, you're just gonna have to take my word that Sanctum is a great way to farm currency. By the way, the last flame example I gave earlier is a reason why low playtime players should be doing Sanctum. While the odds are extremely low, there is potential to hit jackpot here. Getting a singular last flame could probably kickstart your entire build, so consider this if you do not play a lot. Now that we know what we're looking for, we can go into relic strategies. There is no one-size-fit-all relic setup, so I've created a relic flowchart for you to follow. The general guidelines for our relic flowchart go like this. We are going to prioritize comfortability first and foremost. If you are going to be running Sanctum to farm currency, you want to remove as much friction as possible from the process. This would mean getting more honor, getting more move speed, getting more damage, or running the merchant strategy in order to make our runs smoother. Once we can autopilot our runs, we are going to stack as much relic quantity as possible. The amount of quantity of relics you run is directly correlative to how much currency you will be farming in Sanctum. So of course, you want as much of this as possible, but once again, we are prioritizing comfort before this. Remember that if you're running the Desperate Alliance relic, Zarok is significantly more difficult. Also, you'll have to dedicate 4 vertical spots in your relic setup to insert Desperate Alliance. Take all of this into consideration when setting up your relic setup. By the way, I hadn't mentioned this, but you absolutely should be running Desperate Alliance if you can. This is what takes Sanctum from a mediocre farming strategy to one of the best in the game. To reiterate on why I don't have a concrete suggestion on what relic setup you should use, it is because everybody's situation is different. It would be irresponsible for me to tell you to go out there and buy certain relic setups just for it to not work for you. I would be wasting your time if I just parroted what I wrote on my flowchart. So I suggest you open up the flowchart in my description and come back here for a little more detail on each of the setups. Increased quantity of relics is something that everyone should be looking to add in their relic setups. More is better, of course, but not at the cost of comfortability. Remember that you can find comfortability on these relics. There are quantity of relic breakpoints to keep in mind. Every 100% increased quantity of relics will guarantee another unique relic drop by Zarok, and any number above these breakpoints is an additional chance to drop another relic. You can only have a total of 180% quantity of relics found in your relic setup, but by acquiring the Enchanted Urn boon, this can go up to 234%, which is 3 unique relic drops with a 34% chance of getting a 4th. I would suggest at least getting 100% increased quantity of relics, because you can fit in a Desperate Alliance and maybe another extra comfort relic. Only get 180% if you are set on farming the last flame or providing a service that I will go over later. The budget setup is a mishmash of movement speed relics and bosses take increased damage relics. You will not be adding any increased quantity of relics in this setup, so each of the relics will be very cheap. Also, you could opt to add comfortability like honor resistance, but movement speed is king here. On this setup, to make Sanctum profitable, you have to run Desperate Alliance. Otherwise, not having increased quantity of relics will make it so that you do not really profit off of running Sanctum. Because Desperate Alliance produces a good baseline amount of currency in Sanctum, I do believe this is a very viable farming strategy for those who are lower budget. The merchant strategy is a popularly recommended setup for a good reason. It revolves around buying out all the boons at the merchant shop, which completely trivializes Sanctum. This strategy is enabled by the Silver Tongue boon, which reduces prices at the merchant shop by 50%. This, in tandem with merchant choices as well as merchant reduced prices, makes it so that you can buy out the shop consistently. There is a perfect version of this setup that revolves around having 40% total reduced merchant prices. By getting Enchanted Urn, you will receive 52% reduced merchant prices by your relics, and in combination with Silver Tongue, you will have 100% reduced merchant prices, which makes everything in the shop free. While this may sound appealing, relics that have both 10% reduced merchant prices and merchant choices can get very pricey. Furthermore, you will need to run 4 amphoras or tapestries in total, which takes away slots for increased quantity of relics. In my opinion, aim for 20% total reduced merchant prices, as well as 4 to 6 merchant choices. This will be more budget friendly while achieving the same goal of buying out merchant shops. In your empty slots, put in increased quantity of relics. Of course, play around with your setup to find what's most comfortable for you. During your runs, you're going to be pathing towards sacred water fountains and merchants as much as possible. Do not path towards these if there are bad afflictions on them, because at the end of every floor, there will be a boss that drops a sizable amount of sacred water, as well as a merchant. Look for Silver Tongue and Enchanted Urn first and foremost. You should even skip shops if they don't have these boons, because this is what will start snowballing your boon purchases. Ultimately, I think you should only run the merchant strategy if your character is severely unfit for Sanctum. Otherwise, the budget setup is cheaper to run, and stacking increased quantity of relics will scale your currency harder. Now we can get into rooms, boons, and afflictions. For rooms, I generally just try to avoid gauntlets, as it is easily the most time consuming of all the rooms. Do them if you get something you really need from them or to avoid bad afflictions, otherwise just skip them as much as you can. For boons, everybody will typically want the same things. You will want to get Silver Tongue as fast as possible on any relic setup. It enables you to buy out shops even if you're not running the merchant strategy. If you are running the merchant strategy, you will also want to rush Enchanted Urn and Flooded Rivers. Enchanted Urn will increase the effect of your relic setup, which will make buying out merchants easier, and Flooded Rivers will increase the amount of sacred water you find, which will also assist in buying out merchant shops. Note that these two boons are incredibly useful for all relic setups. They are just at the absolute top of the priority list for merchant setups. For everyone that is not using a Temporalis, Harefoot is a godsend. Absolutely get this whenever possible to make your runs faster. Scrying Crystal is the last of the boons I want to talk about. It allows you to see one room ahead, which is incredibly useful for dodging run-ending afflictions. As for every other boon, try to get them of course, but just make the ones I listed beforehand a priority. I didn't mention any major boons because they're really rare. Of course, if you find any of the good major boons, prioritize those, but in over 200 Sanctum runs, I have seen many of these major boons maybe once or twice. Note that if you do find one of these major boons in a merchant shop, use Baiba's gift to purchase them because they're usually more expensive. Afflictions are much more important to talk about because they have the potential to easily end your runs. If you stack Blunt Sword, Enfeeble, and/or Spiked Shell, Zarok can become impossible to kill. Then there are afflictions that lead to other afflictions. Myriad Aspersions is the worst of these, because you will frequently find that afflictions are unavoidable, thus leading to you stacking many afflictions. Then Purple Smoke is the next worst. Being unable to see what afflictions are on your trial map could lead to you getting things like Myriad Aspersions or Blunt Sword. Then there is Deceptive Mirror and Costly Aid. While these two are preferable to the first two, they can also lead to troublesome affliction stacking. These affliction stacking afflictions are a bit more context dependent, because if you get them towards the end of a run, they won't really do anything. But if you fail to steer clear of them at the beginning, this is what your run will end up looking like. Then there are build and relic setup dependent afflictions. For example, if you are an evasion build, Iron Manacles can brick your run. If you are an armor build, Sharpened Arrowhead can brick your run. And if you are an ES build, Shattered Shield can brick your run. Then if you are running a merchant setup, Traditions Demand can brick your run, and so can Forgotten Traditions, and so can Trade Tariff. Aside from the afflictions I pointed out, you should play all the other afflictions by ear. For example, Suspected Sympathizer is much better than having to deal with Blunt Sword. And in this case, where I had no option but to choose a bad affliction, I chose the least worst out of the three. If you had no choice but to get a really bad affliction, look for Pledge Rooms or Fickle Blessings of the Wind Rooms, then pray that you can cleanse the affliction. Now for some quick tips and tricks. If you are able to blink, you can skip Gauntlet Gates by placing a frost wall right in front of it, then pressing blink. If someone messages you to trade, instead of portaling back to town, just access your trial map, and on the bottom left corner you can exit to go back to the entrance of Trial of the Sekhemas. There you can invite them to trade. At the end of a floor, you are able to exit the Trial of the Sekhemas and access your Jin Barrier. It will contain all the information of your run, including what floor you ended on, all of your boons, all of your afflictions, and even your sacred water, keys, and honor. The important part is that it saves the relic setup information, which is valuable if you want to buy or sell Jin Barriers that have quantity of relics on them. If you have 180% increased quantity of relics and ended the run just before the 4th floor, they can sell for 3 divines. Just for proof that they could be re-entered, if you are strong and want to earn a little more currency on the side, you can leave your run right before the boss and invite people to carry them through their ascendancy. If you defeat the boss, they will receive their ascendancy and you can collect payment from them if you so choose. The going rate is about 50 to 60 exalteds per person on the Forbidden Trove, though many people don't take payments anymore, so perhaps if you're looking to receive a carry, you should look in here as well. If you do end up carrying strangers, watch out for them entering the boss room and potentially stealing your loot. That's it for this guide. I hope you could have learned a thing or two even though it came out so late. I also just want to apologize for it coming out so late because I've been promising this video for weeks. As a matter of fact, I've been working on this video for so long that last flame prices went from 330 divines to 390 divines. However, I am not going to update the video, mostly because I am lazy, but because the principles remain the same, and so I see no reason to change things. If you want to see more content of Sanctum, check out 787 Prada as well as Dead Rabbit. Prada actually shows what jewels you should be looking for, and Dead Rabbit has a full 20-minute run you can watch. Thanks for watching this video. I'll catch you next time.